It is time now for our Life and Info segment where we focus on information useful for your everyday life. Today, we are going to talk about the low inflation trend here in South Korea and whether local consumers are feeling the change in their everyday life. Ko Roon-hee is in the studio with us this morning. Good morning. So, Roon-hee, start off by explaining the overall consumer price changes here in South Korea.
Yes, Mark. So consumer price growth in South Korea has remained below 1% level for 5 consecutive months. And this is far below the nation's central bank, the Bank of Korea's target of 2%. According to Statistics Korea, consumer prices edged up 0.7% on-year last month. The agency attributed the sluggish inflation to low domestic demand and the government expanding welfare policies such as free education. A drop in the prices of petroleum goods also contributed to the change. And the trend is likely to continue, with the governor of the Bank of Korea saying consumer prices this year will increase slower than their previous forecast of 1.1%. And as for what this means for the South Korean economy, analysts say low inflation could hurt consumer spending and private investment because they'll assume that prices will remain low in the future.
So what you're saying then is the overall trend shows consumer prices on year are decreasing. But speaking for myself, whenever I go shopping for groceries, I don't really see that being reflected in my day-to-day life. So how can we explain this phenomenon if officially prices are supposed to be going down?
Yes, so although consumer price growth in Korea has remained below 1% range since January, most people say they haven't felt a trend in their everyday lives, especially at supermarkets. Prices of what consumers use and buy every day, such as fresh food and daily necessities, are actually rising, so your eyes aren't deceiving you. Data from Korea Consumer Agency, a government organization, shows that the average price of 30 frequently consumed processed food has been going up in recent months. And this includes a wide range of products, including mineral water, soju, cereal, tofu, milk, and so on. So 18 out of 30 processed food prices increased on month in May. So decided to visit a local retailer to ask consumers about the matter.
I feel like the price of everything has gone up. It's too expensive, especially the things I buy, like rice, anchovies, and fruit. I only buy things that are really necessary.
The price of alcohol has risen, including soju. The cost of drinking has become quite burdensome.
So it's not just groceries, Mark. The average price of dining out, for instance, in Seoul, has jumped as well, which means another financial burden for the average person. Statistics Korea provides a list of prices of popular dining out food like kimbap or samgyeopsal, and you can see that prices increased on year in April. The average price of a roll of kimbap was slightly more than $2 in April, which is an increase from last year's figure of $1.90. Kimchi Chigae with rice, another popular dish people order at restaurants, increased to almost $5.50.
Yeah, I remember when I first came to Korea over 10 years ago, and a roll of kimbap would cost around $1, maybe even a little bit less than that, and kimchi jjigae would certainly cost a lot less than $5.50 US dollars. But times are changing it. So breaking it down then, products that we eat frequently or use a lot, they're on the rise, whereas prices related to things like education and medical expenses and whatnot are actually decreasing. And this is what's bringing down the overall consumer price growth, if I'm reading you correctly there, and keeping it below 1%. What does this difference in real inflation and what people actually feel that it is mean for the South Korean economy?
Well, Mark, the South Korean government explains it's difficult to completely eliminate the differences, saying that different households have different spending habits. However, efforts to reduce the gap is needed, and experts explained why.
In a situation where consumers feel difficulties affording everyday purchases, but figures show prices aren't high, problems can occur when the government establishes economic policies. For instance, public utility charges can change depending on the consumer price index.
So beside the economic policies, this difference between actual inflation and what people feel inflation is like is actually having quite a negative effect on people's lives and the economy in general. We do hope that Korea eventually gets out of this economic rut it finds itself in, because salaries as well have remained rather stagnant as well. So this is really hurting people in the pocketbook. Roonhee, thank you as always for coming in and sharing your report with us.
Thank you for having me.